The Chilkoot Trail winds through mountains and silence, once echoing with the shouts of gold seekers chasing fortune. Today, its stones and pines hold quieter voices, stories whispered around campfires, retold in hushed tones as the northern winds stir. What lingers here is not merely history, but something deeper, something that refuses to be buried beneath time. Some call them ghost stories. Others insist they are warnings carved into the wilderness itself. Hikers and travelers who dared this path speak of encounters that changed them forever, experiences so strange they resist simple explanation. The trail offers beauty and solitude, but in its shadows lies a presence that unsettles even the most seasoned adventurers. Tonight, we walk this path together, step by careful step, through 5 chilling encounters said to defy reason. And as we begin, the first story leads us back to the earliest days of the trail. The late 1800s carved the Chilkoot Trail into legend. What began as a brutal passageway for dreamers and fortune seekers soon became littered with tragedy. Men hauled their lives on their backs, driven by whispers of Yukon gold just beyond the peaks. For many, the trail was a crucible of endurance. For one prospector, however, it became a place where he stepped into silence and never returned. His name has been lost to time. Though records suggest he was a man in his 30s, wiry and determined, last seen near Sheep Camp in the winter of 1897, fellow travelers reported that he carried little beyond his tools, a bedroll and a small sack of provisions. He was described as unusually quiet, his eyes fixed not on the ground before him, but on the darkened ridges above, as though he sensed something others did not. Days later, another group stumbled upon his belongings spread across the snow. The bedroll was unrolled, neatly placed as if he'd meant to sleep but never lay down. His pickaxe was driven upright into the earth, perfectly balanced. A tin cup rested beside it, half filled with frozen water, as though waiting for a hand that would never return. And most peculiar of all, his boots were left standing side by side at the edge of the trail, as if he had stepped out of them and simply walked away barefoot into the drifts. Searchers combed the area, expecting to find his body within a mile or two. The trail was harsh, yet it left its marks. But here there were none, no prints, no struggle, not even the drag marks of scavengers. Just silence. Word spread quickly among other prospectors, who began adding details, each more unsettling than the last. Some swore they saw flickering lantern light moving through the trees at night, though no party admitted to carrying them. Others claimed they heard the steady rhythm of metal striking stone, the unmistakable clink of a pickaxe echoing across the ridges. Yet, whenever they followed the sound, it dissolved into the wind, leaving only the hush of snow and pine needles shifting. Folklore took root. Around campfires, men told each other that the prospector had struck something, perhaps not gold, but something ancient buried in the rock. They said he had awakened it, and in return, the trail had swallowed him whole. Parents in nearby towns began warning their children, stray too far into the pines, and you, too, might be claimed by the one who vanished. Over the years, stories continued to resurface. In 1923, a trapper passing through reported seeing a lone figure crouched beside the trail, swinging a pick in eerie silence. The man wore ragged clothes of another era, and when the trapper called out, the figure turned, revealing nothing but a blur of shadow where a face should have been. The trapper fled, but he swore until his death that the steady clang of metal followed him all the way down the pass. In the 1950s, a group of hikers claimed to hear faint hammering through the night while camped near the summit. Convinced another party was working, they searched at dawn, only to find no one had passed that way in weeks. Their account matched others before them. Strange noises, belongings scattered, and a pressing sense that someone unseen walked just behind them. Even in modern times, rangers patrolling the Chilkoot have reported unexplained sounds. One ranger recounted that while hiking alone, he paused to rest and distinctly heard the metallic ring of a tool striking stone. He radioed his location, assuming a hiker was nearby. But when a search team traced his position, there were no fresh tracks, only the ranger's own. Skeptics argue the prospector's disappearance was nothing more than exposure, exhaustion, or an animal attack. The trail claimed countless lives during the gold rush after all. And yet the arrangement of his belongings remains an anomaly. Why would a man remove his boots in the snow? Why drive his pick into the ground as though marking something unseen? The Chilkoot Trail preserves its secrets, etched not in history books, but in murmurs carried on the wind. Some travelers say that on still nights, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint clink of iron on stone. Others believe the sound is a warning, reminding those who tread the path that the mountain remembers every soul it takes. The wilderness has a way of playing tricks on the mind. Wind weaves through branches until it almost sounds like words. Water dripping on stone mimics footsteps. Yet on the Chilkoot Trail, hikers describe something sharper, something intimate that cuts through the ordinary sounds of the forest. They say the trees call them by name. It rarely begins with anything dramatic. A hiker pauses to adjust their pack, to sip from a water bottle, or to simply catch their breath. Then faintly, a voice drifts from between the pines. At first, it is soft, almost indistinguishable from the sigh of the wind. But then it becomes clearer, impossible to ignore. A loved one's voice, calling them by name. One woman in the early 2000s reported hearing her brother's voice while climbing a steep section. He had been gone for years, lost in an avalanche far from the Chilkoot. Yet she swore it was him, down to the exact cadence, the warmth in the syllables. She froze on the trail, heart racing, straining to hear again. The forest went silent, as if every living thing held its breath. Then once more, her name slipped through the stillness. She nearly followed it, stepping off the marked path, before another hiker shouted, breaking the spell. Others tell eerily similar accounts. A group of 3 trekkers described stopping for the night when one of them suddenly stood and walked toward the tree line, claiming his father was calling. His companions grabbed him before he disappeared into the shadows. He later admitted the voice was so clear, so familiar, that he could not understand why they had stopped him. It felt, he said, like he was waiting for me just beyond the trees. The most unsettling aspect is the consistency. Reports span decades, from lone backpackers to experienced guides. Always the voice belongs to someone the hiker knows, often someone they've lost. And always it beckons from just far enough away to require leaving the trail. Skeptics suggest exhaustion, dehydration, or altitude stress may trigger auditory hallucinations. The Chilkoot is unforgiving. Fatigue blurs reality until the mind fills silence with echoes of memory. Yet those who've experienced it insist the phenomenon carries weight, too real, too deliberate to be dismissed as imagination. They describe the way the wind stills before it begins, how the forest seems to lean inward, how every bird call and insect hum vanishes in anticipation. One of the most chilling stories dates back only a decade. A solo hiker from British Columbia, known for his careful planning, vanished near Stone Crib. Searchers later pieced together fragments of his final hours from notes he scribbled in a pocket journal. The last entry read simply, "He's calling me. He says it's safe." His pack was found neatly against a tree, water bottle capped, gear intact. His footprints veered sharply off the trail into dense brush, where they ended without explanation. Despite extensive efforts, he was never found. Locals whisper that the trail lures wanderers this way, using voices of those they trust most. Some frame it as a test, follow the call, and you vanish into whatever realm lies between memory and wilderness. Others think of it as a trap, set by something ancient that feeds on those who stray. Psychologists argue differently. They suggest the brain, pushed to its limits, summons the comfort of familiar voices to ease stress. But why then do those voices so often beckon away from safety, guiding travelers deeper into danger? Why do they speak with such impossible precision, knowing names, inflections, even private phrases? Hikers who've resisted the call describe lingering unease. One man admitted he hears his late wife's voice sometimes in dreams after returning from the trail, as if the forest planted a seed that continued to grow in silence. He refuses to hike the Chilkoot again. The mystery endures. The voice that calls your name remains one of the most haunting phenomena tied to the trail. And while most return shaken but alive, a few are never seen again. Last heard, answering a familiar voice in the pine. What lies behind that call? Is it merely the human mind unraveling in isolation? Or is there something patient and watchful, waiting to borrow the voices of those we love most? At the summit of the Chilkoot Trail, where ice bites the air and silence seems carved into the stone itself, travelers speak of lights that do not belong to the stars. They appear when the night is clear, hovering just beyond reach, faint at first like distant lanterns swaying in the wind. For weary hikers, they can feel like a blessing, a sign of other camps ahead, or a promise of warmth after the climb. But those who follow them rarely speak of comfort. Accounts describe the orbs as pale, bluish glows, pulsing like heartbeats against the snow. Some drift steadily, leading the way along ridges. Others dart quickly between trees, playful, almost taunting. In every version, the lights carry a strange familiarity, like the bobbing glow of a companion's lantern, always just far enough ahead to urge the traveler forward. One group in the 1930s swore they saw 3 such lights hovering together. Convinced they marked a ranger outpost, they left the marked path to pursue them. By morning, the party was scattered and frostbitten, rescued only by sheer luck. When asked what had driven them so far into the icy expanse, each replied the same. The lights felt alive, as though they had been deliberately leading them astray. Contrast this with the beauty of the northern sky. The aurora often shimmers over the trail, curtains of green and violet rippling like whispered music across the stars. The lights at the summit, however, are different. Smaller, more precise, moving with intent rather than drifting with the currents of space. To those who've seen both, the comparison is stark. The aurora inspires awe. The ghost lights inspire unease. Skeptics point to natural explanations. Swamp gas igniting, reflections of ice crystals, the tricks of tired eyes staring too long into dark horizons. Yet the Chilkoot summit is barren, icy, and unforgiving, hardly a place for swamp vapors. And those who've witnessed the lights swear they behaved with purpose, rising when followed, dimming when ignored, circling back if one hesitated. A chilling detail recurs across decades of testimonies, the sense of being lured. One hiker wrote in his journal that the lights made him feel invited, like a child coaxed to follow. Another survivor recalled the sudden realization that the orbs were guiding them away from safety, down slopes where no trail existed. It was like they wanted us lost, she said, her voice trembling even years later. Folklore interprets them differently. Some say they are the souls of those who perished on the trail, doomed to wander and unintentionally lead others astray. Others whisper of older forces, spirits of the land, testing those who dare to cross. Indigenous stories tell of wandering fires, beings that both guide and deceive. Their true purpose never fully understood. Even modern hikers, armed with GPS and headlamps, describe moments where the forest seems to dim around them and the strange glows emerge. One man confessed that although he knew rationally the lights could not be real, he still felt the pull, an almost magnetic compulsion to step off the trail. It was only the sudden snap of his walking stick against ice that broke the trance. The ghost lights remain one of the trail's most enduring mysteries. They blur the line between beauty and danger, wonder and dread. Perhaps they are tricks of the atmosphere, born of cold air and shifting stars. Or perhaps they are something else entirely, beacons not of safety, but of entrapment. On the Chilkoot Trail, comfort is rare. Nights are long, winds unforgiving, and every bit of warmth feels borrowed from the wilderness itself. That is why stories of the phantom camp unsettle hikers so deeply. It begins with relief, the glow of firelight ahead, the promise of company. But by dawn, that relief curdles into something far darker. The earliest known account comes from the 1920s. Two brothers trekking the trail swore they stumbled upon a campsite tucked against a ridge. The fire was still smouldering, its embers warm to the touch. Tin plates lay scattered with half-eaten food, and a kettle hissed quietly on the coals. Yet no one was there. They waited, calling out, certain the owners would return. Hours passed. No footsteps approached. Unease growing, the brothers pressed on, promising to report the abandoned camp to authorities. Days later, when rangers retraced their steps, the site was gone. No ashes, no scraps of food, no sign it had ever existed. This strange pattern has repeated across decades. Hikers describe the relief of finding signs of human life after days of isolation. Some even sit by the fire, warming their hands against the still glowing embers. But when they glance back, something feels wrong. The air is too still, the forest too quiet, as if holding its breath. Returning later, sometimes only minutes later, they find the spot bare. Not even a scorch mark mars the ground. Psychologists suggest these are hallucinations born of exhaustion and hunger. Yet the details are often too precise, too shared across groups of hikers who had never met. The smell of stew lingering in the air, a spoon dropped carelessly into the dirt, a pack leaning against a log, weathered but real. How do multiple people dream the same camp down to the smallest detail? One chilling account from the 1970s tells of a party of 4 who found such a camp just before nightfall. Tired, they decided to make use of it, rolling out their sleeping bags beside the warm fire, even finishing some of the food left behind. But when morning came, they awoke not to a camp, but to open snow. Their bags lay in the middle of an empty clearing, no fire pit, no kettle, no trace of their midnight meal. Disturbed and shaken, they hiked out in silence, each quietly wondering what exactly they had consumed. Folklore offers other interpretations. Some locals believe these phantom camps are echoes of the past, time slipping just enough for modern hikers to glimpse scenes from the gold rush. Prospectors who perished on the trail may be forever repeating their last nights, the warmth of their fire flickering briefly across decades. Others whisper darker theories that the camps are lures, traps set by something that feeds not on bodies but on trust. Rangers, too, have quietly admitted unease. One recalled approaching what looked like a well-used campsite with colleagues, only to find it gone when they rounded a bend. "We weren't tired. We weren't lost," he insisted. But the firelight we saw was real, and then it wasn't. The most unsettling detail is not the vanishing itself, but the emotional journey it creates. Relief, safety, even joy, all stripped away in an instant, replaced by dread. The wilderness reminds travelers that nothing is certain, not even the comfort of a firelight. The tent is supposed to be a sanctuary. Thin nylon walls may not stop the cold or the rain, but inside them, hikers feel enclosed, separated from the vastness of the wild. Yet on the Chilkoot Trail, countless campers have learned that even this fragile barrier offers no real safety. For when night falls and silence settles, some hear it, the steady rhythm of footsteps circling just beyond the fabric. It begins subtly, a crunch of snow, a shift of gravel. At first, a hiker might dismiss it as an animal nosing through the underbrush, but the sound doesn't fade. It repeats. Slow, deliberate steps measured as though counting time. Around the tent they go, tracing a perfect circle again and again. Hikers describe lying frozen in their sleeping bags, every muscle tense, listening as the unseen walker completes loop after loop. No breathing is heard, no flash of shadow crosses the fabric. Just footsteps, endless, patient, unhurried. One man recalled clutching a flashlight, summoning courage to unzip the tent. But the moment he grasped the zipper, the steps stopped. Outside silence. He waited, heart hammering. Minutes passed, and just as he dared to believe it was over, the sound began again, this time from the opposite side. He never opened the tent. By dawn, the steps had ceased, leaving only undisturbed snow around the perimeter. What terrifies survivors most is the precision. The steps never falter, never wander into camp, never retreat into the woods. They trace the circle like a ritual, as if drawing boundaries around those trapped inside. Some hikers swear the pacing lasts until first light, never breaking rhythm through the long, suffocating hours of darkness. Psychologists point to the power of suggestion, the mind inventing menace in the monotony of night. Yet the accounts are strikingly consistent across generations. Different groups, different decades, the same steady steps encircling them in the dark. Contrast sharpens the dread. The tent, meant to protect, becomes a prison. Inside you are warm, enclosed, tethered to a fragile sense of safety. Outside, something unseen reminds you how thin that fabric truly is. You cannot run. To leave the tent is to confront what waits. You cannot sleep. The sound forbids it. All you can do is lie awake, counting the steps, praying for dawn. In the 1960s, a pair of hikers reported hearing the footsteps begin just after midnight. Terrified, they whispered to each other through the long hours, vowing not to move. When morning came, they emerged to find a perfect ring of prints in the frost, yet each was identical, as though stamped by the same foot over and over again. The pattern stopped abruptly a few yards away, vanishing into untouched snow. Some believe the footsteps belong to spirits of lost travelers circling as they search for a way home. Others whisper darker tales that the trail itself is alive, marking its chosen with endless pacing until fear breaks them. Whatever the truth, those who've endured it carry the memory forever. They speak of the way silence presses after the steps fade, how even daylight cannot erase the sense of having been observed, studied, measured. When a hiker disappears on the Chilkoot Trail, the response is swift. Helicopters sweep the ridges, trained dogs comb the valleys, and teams of seasoned rescuers scour every bend. The effort is immense, a testament to human will against wilderness. Yet time and again, the trail offers nothing back. It swallows its missing whole, leaving behind silence and unanswered questions. Search and rescue veterans speak of the strange resistance they encounter here. Dogs, normally eager, noses sharp, sometimes halt without warning. They whimper, circle, and refuse to move forward, as if repelled by something unseen. Handlers tug at their leashes, but the animals plant their paws firmly, eyes fixed on the tree line with a fear their masters cannot explain. Then there are the malfunctions. Radios sputter with static, voices dissolving into crackles the moment teams near certain ridges. Compasses spin lazily, their needles refusing to settle. Batteries, fresh that morning, drain within hours. Rescuers accustomed to hostile terrain admit the Chilkoot feels different, like a place where the land itself interferes, where tools designed for survival lose their certainty. One search leader recounted an operation in the 1980s, when a group of volunteers spent days combing the fog-shrouded pass for a missing solo hiker. Each night they camped together comparing notes. More than once, members reported hearing distant voices calling through the mist, faint but urgent, as if the lost man were just out of reach. Yet no matter how far they followed, the voices faded into silence. Later, when reviewing maps, they realized every sound had led them away from known trails into more dangerous ground. The contrast is stark. On one side, human determination, dogs, helicopters, radios, dozens of boots striking Earth in unison. On the other, the trail's indifference, offering only shifting fog and silence. It is not the struggle against weather or exhaustion that unnerves rescuers most, but the sense of being led astray, of working tirelessly in a place that seems to resist being known. Perhaps the most chilling case occurred in the early 2000s, when a search for two missing hikers stretched nearly 2 weeks. Despite clear weather, despite every effort, no trace was found. Rescuers later admitted to an uncanny sensation during the mission, the feeling of being watched. One ranger described standing on a ridge and suddenly sensing eyes on him, though no figure appeared in the valley below. The unease spread through the team until even the most seasoned among them refused to continue after dark. Skeptics argue these anomalies stem from stress, fatigue, or the disorienting effect of fog. The Yukon is vast, its terrain is merciless, but those who've served on the front lines insist the Chilkoot is different. They speak of the quiet that settles too suddenly, of radios failing only in certain places, of search dogs trembling as though confronted with something far beyond scent. And always, there is the same result. Nothing. No footprints. No gear, no bodies. Only the mist curled back over the trail as if erasing what little evidence remained. The pines along the Chilkoot rise like pillars, dark and endless, their needles catching the wind in long sighs. The sound here carries strangely. A whisper spoken yards away can travel like a secret confided directly into your ear. At night, the forest seems alive with murmurs, rustles, creaks, and soft voices that vanish the moment you turn your head. Most hikers dismiss them as tricks of the wilderness, but some swear the whispers knew them. One woman recalled waking in her tent to hear her name spoken just above the fabric wall. It wasn't loud, nor threatening, but it was personal, intoned in the same rhythm her mother once used. Her mother, long past, could not have been there, and yet the voice lingered with such clarity that she wept quietly until dawn. Others report fragments of sentences drifting from the trees, not random sounds, but words with meaning, a phrase a spouse often repeated, a joke only a close friend would know. Survivors say the realization chills more deeply than the cold itself. Whatever spoke to them wasn't repeating generic noise. It was reaching into memory, pulling out pieces no stranger could have known. Some hikers describe the forest as a chamber, amplifying and bending sound until it feels like dozens of voices overlap. A man once admitted he heard whispers naming landmarks from his childhood, hundreds of miles away from the trail. Another told of hearing instructions on where to step next, spoken in his own voice, as though he were both the listener and the guide. Skeptics argue exhaustion creates illusions. The human brain, deprived of rest, fills silence with echoes of familiarity. But the consistency of these accounts troubles even the rational-minded. Too many people have emerged with the same story, whispers that are not only heard, but understood. Whispers that pierce through memory with surgical precision. Folklore paints them as the voices of those who vanished, trapped beneath the trees, desperate to be remembered. Others believe the pines themselves carry awareness. Their rustling, not merely wind, but communication from something rooted in the earth. Something old enough to know every step made along the trail. For the hikers who return, the effect lingers. Many describe a silence that feels heavier after the whispers fade, as if the forest withdraws once it realizes they will not follow. Some carry the words home, haunted by the thought that what called to them knew them too well to be chance. The Chilkoot whispers remain one of its most enduring mysteries. Are they echoes of grief, tricks of the wilderness, or something more deliberate, something that studies those who enter and learns how to speak in voices they cannot resist? The Chilkoot Trail is more than earth and stone. It is a passage layered with memory of prospectors chasing fortune, of families searching for loved ones, of modern hikers drawn to test themselves against the wild. Yet woven into its history are threads that refuse to unravel, stories that echo through generations with unsettling familiarity. Rational minds point to obvious culprits.
Isolation distorts perception.
Exhaustion blurs the line between waking and dreaming. Weather plays tricks with sound, light, and time. The trail is unforgiving, and the human mind, stretched to its limits, can conjure voices, lights, and footsteps where none exist. Such explanations offer comfort, proof that the wilderness is vast but not malicious, and yet doubt lingers. Too many stories share the same details: names whispered in the dark, camps that vanish without trace, footsteps circling until dawn. These accounts span decades, cultures, and generations of hikers. If they were hallucinations, why do they repeat so precisely, as if the trail itself were retelling its favorite tales? Perhaps that is why the Chilkoot fascinates as much as it terrifies. It is not simply a path through mountains. It is a mirror for those who walk it. It reflects fear, longing, and memory in ways both intimate and eerie. Some leave carrying only exhaustion. Others leave convinced they brushed against something beyond explanation, something ancient and watchful, hiding in the spaces between silence. As the stories accumulate, the trail's shadow grows longer. Even for those who never step onto its stones, the accounts stir unease. They remind us that not every mystery is meant to be solved, and not every voice in the night can be trusted. The Chilkoot Trail still stretches quietly across the Yukon, its ridges dusted with snow, its pines swaying in winds older than memory. By day it welcomes hikers with beauty and silence. By night it waits. The footsteps, the whispers, the ghostly fires, whether tricks of mind or echoes of the past, cling to this place like shadows that never fade. Every story told here carries the same lingering weight, a reminder that the wilderness does not simply shelter us, it watches us. Some who enter return with only tired muscles and photographs. Others bring back memories they cannot explain.
And a few
do not return at all.